Welcome back to another episode of BP Builds. In today's episode, the 69 GTO drives for the first time in 30 years. When we first got the GTO, it had been sitting in someone's backyard for a long time, with no engine or transmission. Thus far on this build, we got our Craigslist engine running, installed it in the car with a Muncie 4-speed, checked all the brake lines, replaced various suspension bits including bushings, shocks, and springs. In today's episode, we will focus on a front disc brake conversion, steering rack, and getting the GTO drivable.
Okay, so we got new disc brakes on here with a set of 15-inch wheels and new shocks, new sway bar end links.
Man, where did we start? We had drum brakes on the front of the car.
Yeah.
And so we had to change the spindles out in order to go to a front rotor setup, rotor and caliper. So in order to do that, we didn't have a spring compressor. So in order to make everything work, I used a jack to jack up and take pressure off of the suspension. Loosened these inner nuts on the top and bottom, and then slowly let the jack down until everything kind of spread apart enough. On the other side, we had to use a pickle fork in between each of these. This is a pickle fork. You just slam it into here and it kind of releases it. But on this side, it was loose enough where I could just use a kind of a mini sledgehammer. You just kind of hit here, and that was enough pressure to release everything. So it all just kind of spread apart, but you don't want to let it just spring apart because that thing will just launch you across the room. Everything was kind of spelled out well. It took me a couple tries to get all the order right on the other side, but this one's going much, much easier. But I guess it's fairly obvious if you get everything out on the bench and look at it.
So we ended up putting in a steering box from 1988 Monte Carlo, which has anywhere from I think 2 3/4 turns from lock to lock to 3-inch lock to lock of the steering wheel. Versus the original factory, which was 4 or 4.5 turns from lock to lock, so it's a little bit tighter of a ratio. So that was kind of a slick upgrade. We needed to put a coupler adapter on the steering column, and we also needed to get some hydraulic adapters to go from the O-ring style modern fitting to the old flare style fittings. So we replaced this because 1, I broke it, and 2, we wanted a better steering ratio. So even though it's a 4-bolt flange, there's only 3 bolts holding it through the frame. There's 2 lines, a low pressure in and a high pressure out. Actually no, those are both high pressure lines. Yeah, high pressure in, high pressure out. Or maybe it's low pressure out. I don't know. There's a line in and a line out. You disconnect. And then there's a little coupler that goes on to this that connects to your steering shaft. So we actually need a new one of those because the splines were stripped. So there's 1 bolt in that, 2 bolts there, 3 bolts there, and then we had to disconnect the pitman arm. And I ended up using a puller to pull the pitman arm off. Since this is a tapered shaft, it was kind of stuck on there, so as soon as it popped off, it was pretty easy. And then I also took the pitman arm, I ended up using a pickle fork to separate the ball joint on the other end of the pitman arm to the steering linkage. That was it. So for the exhaust, we ultimately ended up going to the system complete from Jegs. We bought the headers to start with, and then there was a GM A-body custom exhaust kit that I welded together, TIG-welded the whole thing together, and pretty simple. I think it's a 2.5-inch that flows dual exhaust all the way back, some universal mufflers, and then out the back of the car just how it's supposed to. We got the e-brake cable working. We've got transmission all together. There's some new bushings in the rear. The gas tank's all cleaned out. The brake lines are good, the fuel lines are good. There's 4 new shocks all the way around. I think these are for the front. For such a big car, these are really tiny shocks. It's the original gas tank. You just painted it, cleaned it out, painted it. So like I said, we got some dual exhaust going from the front of the car to the back of the car. It was a universal kit from Jegs. Came with most everything we were able to find in our box of parts, all the factory muffler hangers. So that's good. Sounds okay. Could be a little bit more aggressive. So we got an air cleaner from a 68 GTO, I think. It's not the ram air that came with the car, but it's functional. Still have to put the other valve cover back on, but we did put polylocks in on the rockers because the factory rocker nuts were backing out and getting loose. If there is still ticking, we could have some stuck lifters, which is a bigger job for later on, but right now it should be drivable. Front end of the car is back together, wiring's a little bit more tidy, but not perfect.
Well, we eliminated the voltage regulator that they normally had for the unregulated alternators that they had on these cars. But since we're to a one-wire internally regulated alternator, all we had to do was feed it power, essentially to the battery. So I have one wire coming in from the ignition switch directly to the alternator, which will then run to the battery. And that should be all we really need. I adapted the wire to the distributor, so now we're at the right interface for the distributor rather than going to the little canister coil that would have originally been on this car. And I ran a new wire down to the starter because that's a lot longer than the small block that was in here. And that's about it. Where it is.
So the brake master cylinder, the brake kit came with the master cylinder, the brake booster, spindles, hubs, calipers, caliper brackets, brake pads, and that was a great stuff kit, which is pretty good. The only thing we didn't do is we used the factory lines and distribution block, which we will change out next time we pull the motor, because right now it's currently located in a spot that's impossible to get to without pulling the motor. But I have all new lines for the car, even though these ones are sufficient for now. So that's probably a project for next year. One more box from the right stuff. We got a proportioning valve and a brake light switch. Alright.
It might fit actually.
Looks like it will.
Yeah, it'll fit. Pull it.
Alright. So there's 4 nuts to hold the master to the firewall, and 1 clevis that goes in the brake pedal, as well as the 2 lines that are attached right here. And yes, there is fluid in here still. worked really well. The only thing you have to consider is that this car came with factory 14-inch wheels, which the disc brakes won't clear. You need you need 15-inch wheels for the disc brakes to clear.
After sitting idle for 30 years, after months of work, after installing original, used, and select performance parts, our GTO is moving under its own power like she's supposed to. Previously undisturbed surfaces now awoken are releasing dust, mouse nests, and corrosion byproducts. The driving experience is true to a classic American body-on-frame, rear-wheel drive muscle car. Heavy, but with instant torque the moment you push down the throttle. Or, simply put, freedom on four wheels. The 1969 GTO is alive and runs amazing. And, most importantly, she does burnouts. Thanks for watching. Please hit the subscribe button to support the channel.